Arsenal win on opening day, but leave just enough in it in the second half to make sure that you were still paying attention. This is the ArsenalVision post-match podcast. My name is Elliot, Smith, on Twitter, Yank Gunner. Hello. Welcome to season 8 of the ArsenalVision post-match podcast, which is really just the ArsenalVision podcast because we do a lot of them and they're not always post-match, but they are here. We are ready for a season of being wrong about so much. Being right, well, maybe from time to time, but I don't really care about being wrong or right. What I care about is that we get to have really fun, in-depth, hopefully insightful conversations about the Arsenal together, not just on the podcast, but beyond with all of you. And so happy to have you here. We rolled out our first instant reaction with Clive, Paul, and myself right after the game over on Patreon with the new Patreon music. And what you've just heard is the new main pod music. Now, the good news about this, like our football opinions, is unanimity, the unanimity of reaction to it. So I appreciate everyone feeling exactly the same way. The most important thing that you should feel is joy because Arsenal did get 3 points on opening day. And we are recording this just at full time of Liverpool-Chelsea. And you should be feeling further joy because I think we can conclusively say, wow, those teams aren't winning the title. Klopp went full, I'm mad at the owner with his lineup. Oh, you don't think I'll play Cody Gakpo in midfield with McAllister and Szoboszlai? Watch me. And we did watch him, and it was pretty funny. All things being equal, a satisfactory start to the season, Arsenal up and running. And I think the cool thing is it's a game that gives us just enough to dissect. There's a lot there. There's a lot of divergent opinions. There's a lot of selection questions. There's a lot of substitution questions. So it's just what you want. 3 great points to start the season and plenty to debate and discuss on a podcast. What could be better? Thank you, Mikel and the boys for delivering that. I don't have a lot to tell you other than that now the Patreon podcasts are available on Spotify. If you listen to podcasts on Spotify, always been the case that you can take the Patreon feed and just put it into your podcast player and they'll just show up for, regularly. But now you can do that with Spotify too for the first time. So that's cool. Not a lot else to tell you other than that I'm just so thrilled to be here with Paul, who you can find on Twitter at Pause My Pencil. Pause.
Woohoo! Remember, Elliot, it's always post some match. Don't back down.
That's true. We are the post-match podcast. It's just what match are we recording post? Mm-hmm. It's full-time somewhere, as they say.
Feckham.
And Feckham is also what they say. Well, I don't say that. Paul says that because he's an extremely disrespectful person. And here with me now is Tim. You can find him on Twitter at Stillminator. Hello, Tim.
Hello there.
Hello there. Indeed. Clive did make his instant reaction appearance. He is bailing on us because I don't know. I think he's going back down to the cafe to have lunch with his mate, Rio Ferdinand. If you missed it, he was on TNT, formerly BT Sport, talking to Rio Ferdinand and ignoring the beautiful breakfast in front of him. So Breakfast Gate, certainly a thing that we'll be discussing at some point. But Clive and I'll be on tomorrow with a rewatch of, I am going to say, the first half of the Forest game. I know Clive wants to watch the second half because he likes seeing misery. I like seeing joy. So we will debate that and discuss that. And Clive will be back on a main pod later this week. I promise. We also rolled out our first Friday cocktail hour live stream on YouTube, which is cool. And we'll be having our office hours in Discord probably tomorrow, where we just go on and chat with you guys person to person. So lots of good stuff going on. I've made it through all that in 3 minutes and 24 seconds, which for me is basically a record. Let's get right into it. Tim, I don't want to do more than 60 seconds on this, but I feel like we should at least discuss it because it happened. I know there are a lot of people watching who will have been impacted by it and many who weren't, but we were all impacted by the fact that I set my alarm for 6:28 a.m. and could have set it for 6:58 a.m. because the game was delayed, because the digital passes, the system that accepts them did not work. For people who don't know, Arsenal went to a digital-only scheme this season to get into the stadium, and it didn't work. Do you want to just give us a quick synopsis of that experience? Did you get in okay? Was there any point at which you started to get a little nervous about a crush or crowding? Because some of the pictures I saw, it was getting a little crowded out there by some of the turnstiles. So what was your experience with it? And then we'll move on to football stuff.
Yeah, I completely missed all of it because I got in early.
Nice. Well done.
Yeah. So I had no idea it was going on because I kind of got in, I don't know, just after maybe 11:15, something like that. I was going in because they were showing the first half of the England women's game. Well, in fact, they showed the whole game, but obviously most of the second half clashed with our game. But yeah, so I went in to watch that. And frankly, for a 12:30 kickoff, most of the pubs don't really open till 11. So there's not really any point in going to a pub before the game for a 12:30. You're kind of better off going in the stadium anyway. They had a buy one, get one free offer. So it just made a lot more sense to go in there. But it wasn't until I was literally heading to my seat when someone, I think a steward, said, "Oh, it's been delayed half an hour," at which point I promptly got back in the queue and bought another beer and then looked out the window downstairs. And yeah, it did look, it did. I'm not entirely clear on what happened yet, because I spoke to the club before the game, and earlier this week they did a big comms push about people downloading their passes onto their phone. I think they said to me at the beginning of the week, they were like, "We've got about 90%, but we want to do a big push for the last 10%. So I think the majority of people had. I don't know whether it was like an electronic or digital failure or something like that, or there's a thing now where you can't use screenshots anymore. Maybe people had screenshots, etc. So I don't really know what exactly went on. I think it was always likely that people were going to be in late, but I don't think they anticipated on this kind of scale. But then I watched Brentford Spurs today, and that was delayed for 10 minutes because there was no running water in the stadium. So there we go.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess if I had to pick the two potential problems, I'd go with the digital pass thing over the no running water thing, given that you might occasionally have to use the restroom during the game. All right.
Particularly if you've got a buy one, get one free offer.
Yeah. Look, at the end of the day, I don't think it was a giant crisis. I do feel for people that were put out by it, maybe contributed to the atmosphere not being quite as lively. Also, let's face it, we haven't had a lot of 12:30 Saturday kickoffs in the last several years. And I think people forget the atmosphere is a little different at those games just because you haven't had time to booze it up. You haven't had time to really wake up. You're getting up in the morning, you're going straight to the stadium. And so it's a different kind of experience. But all in all, it was a lovely day for football. And we'll get to the football. Paul, I got to thank Mikel. He's given us our first lineup discussion of the new season. Last season, by and large, you could name the 11 if they were fit. Obviously, no Gabriel Jesus being available meant that there was a question around who would get the striker role. What I don't think any of us predicted is that there would be no Gabriel Magalhaes. Now, there was a rumor the night before the game that Gabriel wasn't going to be fit for the game. And then people debunked that rumor. In fact, we were doing our live stream when it broke and then still doing our live stream when it was debunked. But he didn't start. Now, the manager said it was tactical, so you kind of got to believe the manager, but it is a little weird putting two and two together. The night before the game, there's a rumor he's not going to play. I think he came off in the Community Shield, maybe with a little bit of a knock, so who knows? It breaks a streak of 73 consecutive Premier League starts, so it is a little odd. We went with Partey at right back. The rest of the back four sort of as expected, and Eddie Nketiah gets the start up front, allowing Mikel to then fit in all three of the new signings. What were your thoughts on the absence of Gabriel and the lineup that he did pick?
Yeah, it was odd, but maybe that's the wrong word. It was different. And we all said we wanted different this year in terms of lineups, in terms of approaches. We discussed, maybe we didn't question, but we discussed, is Mikel Arteta, he talks a game in terms of putting out different looks for different teams. And yet last year, he basically trusted an 11 plus a couple, and that if all fit, they were played. And we said before the season kicked off, we hoped, we expected, we wanted to see him use his full squad, to have 16, 17, 18 players he trusts, to show different looks, different ways of playing. It's a long season. We play with a lot of intensity. We start the first half quick. We start the second half quick. We press, we chase. You can't do that for 50-something games. You need different ways of playing. The best managers evolve as they go. So, here it was. It was like, not only did we not expect that lineup, we weren't sure where people were going to stand when they went out there. And they stood in positions that surprised or didn't surprise. And then the ball gets kicked off. The game gets kicked off. And the players move to very different positions. In fact, it was basically the best part of everybody but William Saliba roaming around the pitch. And, I think there was a certain nervousness from the supporters, from myself, during the game and even after the game. But when you go back and look at it, it was great. Now, we've lots to learn about. There are better ways of doing it. The players themselves will learn when to adjust into and out of, in possession or against the counter-attack. But you had guys going all over the place. And last year, there was a lot of people sitting back and us kind of trying to grind them down. And the amount of movement in the first half from... I'd read this piece before the game yesterday that talked about having what you wanted was a liquid attack and a solid defense, or maybe you could split it into a liquid front five and a solid back five. But we didn't even do that. We had a liquid back five. And I wonder if that had something to do with their success against us on the counterattack. We might have had the right guys in the right positions, but they'd just been wandering around all over the pitch, and suddenly they've to lock in and snap in. And I think that will be something that improves. The guys will switch to defense and know that it's their runner, their guy, their zone, even if they were in roughly the right position when the thing unfolded in one or two situations. Switching, the clicking is the thing they'll need to learn.
I agree with large components of that. The only thing I would say is, at least in the first half, I don't think they counterattacked. I don't think they did anything. They had that one weird header out, header back where they got in two guys standing in the same place and the defender's not necessarily knowing who to mark. And interestingly, it's Saliba standing in the Gabriel Magalhaes position. But I honestly don't think that was it. I think it's one of those fluke things where as players are pushing out, one's offside, one isn't, and you're not sure. You don't know the other guy's there, so you leave him. I wouldn't read too much into that situation. Otherwise, Forrest did very little in the first half. But Tim, so
can I say one thing on that?
Please.
Elliot? Yeah. I think you're right. I looked at the PPDA number, which is how heavily we press them in their half, how few passes they get off under pressure. We were astounding, and that must have been from the first half. We had a score of 4 PPDA, which is really good, basically.
Let me just stop and explain for people. That's passes per defensive action, meaning we made a defensive action within them playing 4 passes
on average across the whole game. And the second half was much more of a normal game of football. So that's basically all from the front. And I think Tim had a really good view of this. We absolutely smothered and battered them every time they lost the ball. And Tim talked a little bit about that in the WhatsApp. The first half, we, more than any game I remember, we had so many players in positions to get that broken ball or smother the pass or whatever.
Yeah, just to give you some numbers to that, we had 84.2% possession in the first half. We completed 91% of our passes. They completed 59%. So just over half the time they passed, it was not completed. Tim, so I am torn on this. On the one hand, I think Mikel absolutely nailed it with the lineup. And what I mean is, if you're playing an opponent who has not a little bit of interest in playing, not some interest in playing, no interest in playing. I mean, not one guy standing at the halfway line waiting to counter, all 11 men behind the ball. Then it makes sense to take off a center back and get in one more ball progressor, right? One more guy who can play. And that's exactly what he did. And it played out perfectly in the first half, I thought, because we didn't need Gabriel. By getting Partey on, what you're able to do is have Partey invert, where he's very progressive, and I thought he was fantastic in the first half, progressing the ball and doing what he does in little tight spaces. You can also fit both Rice and Havertz, plus your wide players, plus a striker. Mm-hmm. I think he got it right for the situation he was facing. I think why I was, and look, you have to speak the truth. I can't lie. It's out there. You can look at my Twitter feed or the Discord. I didn't love the lineup for one simple reason. I feel like we are not fully baked yet coming out of preseason. And I think what I was hoping is that we could start the season picking a fairly consistent side to get fully baked, whether it's Rice or Havertz at 9 while Jesus is out, get players comfortable and confident in their positions. We look pretty good against City. I probably would have just done that again and let these players really get comfortable and confident in a position so that we look more fully baked, then start mixing and matching for opposition a little bit. Now, to be fair, if Mikel is fibbing a bit and Gabriel wasn't available, this may absolutely be the next best option he had available. So what do you think on the way we set up, but also maybe my Whiskers view that we could stand to maybe figure out plan A more firmly right now. Although I acknowledge it played out brilliantly for what he picked.
Yeah, it's interesting because there's a couple of ways of looking at it. You could say, look, it's Forest at home. We should because the way to kind of integrate that is to do it. And you could look at it, and I kind of think that a little bit we did, and we went, look, we've got the team who had one of the worst away records in Premier League history last season. It's by far the worst of any team that has not been relegated. I think it was the second worst. They got 7 points. I think only that Derby team that got 12 points overall did worse than that away from home. So it was a real gift of a first game. And so I do think there is some kind of merit in just saying, do you know what? These guys are rubbish. Even if it doesn't fully work, we should still be able to win, which is what happened. I agree with you. I think this was just about getting another midfielder onto the pitch. I think Partey in the first half, where he was coming in, he was taking a player with him, and that was leaving Saka free, and that worked really nicely. You know, Forest had, I've forgotten his name, the guy who scored against us last season, who wasn't quite fit to start the game, but came on.
The one who scored in this game, Awoni?
Yeah.
Awoni, sorry.
Yeah, that's it. And they played Brennan Johnson through the middle, I think, through a lack of choice, really. And it was just a bit of a Hail Mary, a bit of a, if we can hoof a long ball. But I do think there was a bit more behind it than just the kind of, let's just get an extra midfielder. I think having Partey and Havertz, you know, as Paul said, we had a blanket over them in the first half. It was just every time they cleared the ball, whoosh, on them, back. And I think picking Partey and Havertz to play, let's face it, in midfield was all part of that. It wasn't just, I think it was like, I don't know, maybe 40%. Yeah, this way we get Havertz, Nketiah, Partey, Rice, like we get all of them in the team. But I think a part of it as well was these are also some of our best interceptors. And if you look at where Declan Rice was playing in this game, he wasn't hanging around the centre circle. He spent a lot of time on the edge of the area, and it was very much like, you're great at intercepting as well, so why don't you do it, you know, maybe 35 yards from their goal?
He was
there will
brilliant
be games
off the ball, by the way, in that first half in particular. Brilliant.
Yeah, and he wasn't sitting. He was pushing forward. There was a lot of rotation of position. Havertz was out wide at times, so Martinelli could come in. Sometimes Rice was in that kind of left 8, and it was Partey kind of staying back. A lot more rotation of positions. And it really, really worked so well in that first half. I'm sure we'll come on to the lull in the second half and why that happened, and I have some theories. But I thought this was about getting some of our best, like, bang, interceptors on the pitch as well.
I'll be curious to hear your second half theories, because I'm not sure I have it figured out. I did rewatch, and I think I liked the performance more and more. Look, there was some of that sterile domination thing, but the other team gets to do tactics too. I thought Forest were organized. They had a lot of bodies behind the ball. Match of the Day did a good job, I have to admit, with one section of their analysis showing that we didn't switch the ball quick enough. And I think this is an issue for Arsenal. Sometimes we stretch the pitch really well. Mikel had a brilliant game plan here. We'd get the ball out to the left, and Odegaard and Saka would get really wide to be able to combine, but we wouldn't switch it to them fast enough to exploit the space. I also thought there were times where Martinelli was way out on the left in tons of space. We couldn't swing it around fast enough. So I think one of the things they'll be looking at in their video sessions, and what I'm sure Clive and I will look at in the rewatch when we do it tomorrow, will be how do you switch the ball faster against these low blocks to really force them to stretch across the pitch and take advantage of the spaces. Having said that, Paul, we still did create a lot of good openings wide. It started with Saka, then it moved to Martinelli and back to Saka. Early in the game, we get the ball over the top to Saka, and he puts in a cross that I think he has a right to be a little annoyed no one gets onto. In fact, there were a couple of really good crosses where I think we should expect, whether it's Eddie or Havertz or Martinelli, or I don't remember in the specific situations, someone to maybe gamble or be on their toes a little quicker. But we really tried to exploit the wide spaces. And I think in this game, Saka and Martinelli were both brilliant. Saka obviously gets the brilliant goal. Martinelli, 8 ball recoveries in this game. He obviously has that roulette back heel pass to Nketiah. There were some people in the Discord suggested he didn't mean it. And all I can say to that is, how dare you? He absolutely meant it. That is the full Brazilian flair in effect. Martinelli was relentless, and I think really showed why the manager does pick him, even over Trossard, who will feel like he had a right to start, because 8 ball recoveries, right? The way he runs back and gets the ball back and turns that then into attack. What do you think of the way we exploited wide spaces in Saka and Martinelli, who I thought really starred in the first half?
To be honest, like it's the first game of the season, I think one can be overly picky about how quickly we move the ball. I mean, this was a very, very different setup for us against a team that's pretty good. They may have a bad record away from home, but they're used to doing this a lot. 5 at the back, clogging the box. I think we did great. We had 2 goals within 32 minutes. It was never going, and we got those triangles on the right-hand side. Odegaard and Saka were beginning to mince them. We had runners coming across all the time. Nketiah going right, Havertz coming in to fill that space. Guys between the lines. I mean, I don't know what people thought was going to happen. We were just going to have our way with them at the back in the first 30 minutes. It was never going to happen. They're good at that. They can't do it for 90 minutes. They can't keep all the goals out, but they're very good at that. And yet we scored 2 goals in the middle of all of that. I've no complaints about the first half for the first game, for players finding new spots, finding their movements. I think there's a big, big difference between how we set up in the first half and the second half structurally. In the first half, Partey was pretending to play at right back. Mm-hmm. And drifting into the middle, and then Rice would be there, and then Rice would push forward. In the second half, we didn't do that. Rice was basically playing the Xhaka role. There was no Havertz ahead of him. Havertz was in the middle, and so we had 3 guys between the line. And if you think of the first half, Havertz was doing a lot over to the left, kind of rotating with Martinelli, connecting, moving more centrally, and then back. He didn't move centrally. He was central. He was in that spot you'd expect Nketiah to drop into in the second half. With very different setup. No pretense that Partey wasn't the DM. He wasn't moving to that spot and then Rice was moving on. So the 2 very different halves run at 2 different paces. But the first half, for a first game with guys doing something different, I wouldn't critique it for anything. And yes, we could move the ball faster, but like no shock there.
Yeah, I think it's a 9.5 out of 10 first half. I really do. I mean, for the challenge that they wanted to create for us. And I think Mikel gave a really good answer, really interesting answer on, understanding that we have to pick teams to try to give the opposition more problems than we did. When asked about his unexpected selection, he says, we expected a game that actually happened, which is always a good sign. And we needed somebody else there in midfield to do what we have to do best and have more fluidity and occupy certain spaces in relation to how they were defending. I think it worked really well. And what he added is, I think, really important to our season going forward. That's my job, to create bigger problems for the opponents and than the ones they are creating for us, and to play the best possible way to earn the right to win the game and have the highest probability to win the game. In order to do that, we have to pick the right players every week, not to start only, but as well to finish. And the players that come in the final part of the game, they really help us as well to earn the right to win. So I think that is a sort of really telling answer about how
he could be quite critical of himself for the execution, or say that we did good things, but we didn't finish it off. We didn't execute our plan. He's basically saying we had an idea, we did it, and I'm delighted with how it played out.
Yeah. Tim, on the left, we had a guy winning the ball back relentlessly and facilitating. On the right, we had a guy who I think just seems to appreciate that he is the star. I have often said on this podcast that Arsenal are missing a force of nature player. And I think I said at the start of last season, Jesus looked like he was positioned to be that. And what I mean by that is, when these teams make it really hard for you, sometimes you need someone who gets you a goal and ruins their game plan, not because you broke them open, but because he's just better than they are, right? I think City wanted a little of that with Haaland. Haaland is a battering ram, and like, you can be really good and Haaland can pop up out of nowhere and get his extend a leg onto the end of a ball, and suddenly you're behind when you didn't really do much wrong. I I think Bukayo Saka might be becoming that, because that goal he scores, you need goals like that. You cannot just expect them to all be tap-ins and walk-ins and beautiful picture book goals. You need solitary moments of genius. So in place of Paul, who opted to go another direction with his answer, and I think it was lovely, and we all appreciate it, because someone has to play the role of Clive on this podcast, and apparently Paul is doing that. I will ask you, what do you think of our two captivating, sensational budding superstars on the wings and the performance they gave us in this game?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they had the two moments that won us the game. And, Martinelli, when he makes that assist, that it was, I'm going to give it the highest possible compliment. It was Bergkamp-esque in that Bergkamp, he was capable of those flourishes, right? We all knew he was, but he only did them when it was the only way through. And that's the same with Martinelli here. He's got two defenders in front of him. They are both brilliantly positioned. They've kept pace with him. Like, he's got the ball out wide. He's running at them. They are both in a very, very good position to deal with that. But he just pulls out a move that you can't really defend, because you can't train for that. You can't train for... what if he does a double drag back and back heel right into the centre forward? Like, and it's kind of the same with Saka's goal as well. Forest are well positioned. Like, Steve Cooper, I'm sure, will look at that goal and just go, do you know what? You're all standing roughly where I want you to be standing. And managers will always tell you, if the guy blasts it in the top corner from 30 yards, he does. So that's what he does. And it's the same with Martinelli and Saka. And actually, I think you get the essence of these two players from this game, in that Martinelli is relentless, like absolutely relentless, got that kind of Suarez thing going on where he won't give anyone a second's piece on and off the ball, whereas Saka's just got this way of gliding through games, and Saka's just got this way where his 70% is better than your 100%. And, maybe that's doing him a slight disjustice. Maybe it's just because he's so good it looks easy, but he's just got a way of floating through games, a bit like a boxer who's a bit like, do you know what? Going to take round 4 and round 5 off. I'm not going to punch. I'm just going to defend, make sure I don't get punched. Round 6, I'm coming for you type thing. He's really, really got that game intelligence. And yeah, I mean, those two players win us the game. It's that simple, and they do it in the first half. And so, look, I thought the second half was bad, but they make that irrelevant ultimately to the result. I'm sure Arsenal will analyse the performance. We will analyse that and everything, but you do that in the first half in particular, job done.
Yeah, and by the way, a little hat tip on the Saka goal for the William Saliba assist, because from the right wing position, Saliba wins the ball back, spins out of pressure, and finds Saka. And William Saliba completed...
And that's what we're talking about, right? The kind of just bang, up you get. Like, I'm taking the ball off you, and I'm not just taking the ball off you, I'm giving it to someone. And sorry, I should have said thanks to Paul on the instant reaction for acknowledging the foot soundness of the Martinelli assist in my absence.
Wouldn't be the ArsenalVision podcast if someone didn't bring up futsal background. Look, William Saliba, just while we're on him, 127 of 130 passes. I mean, why do you need two center backs when one can do the job of two in the buildup? Really just extraordinary contribution from him. And overall, I thought, the first half, we just saw the best of what everyone could do. I think maybe since Arteta arrived, that first half is the best counter-pressing we've done at any point since Arteta's been here. The way we closed space, and it was Martinelli being relentless, but also Declan Rice's impact was felt. I think I've been trying to get a sense of what Declan Rice's role really is and what his impact is. He's a cheat code for counter-pressing. The way he can get the ball off the opposition is so impressive. Another player, though, that we're really trying to get a sense of is I was going to say Granit Xhaka, the guy who replaced Granit Xhaka, at least in the formation in this game, and that's Kai Havertz. And watching again, man, is that a good first half from Havertz. I mean, I think it's interesting because he had two different roles. Late in the game, he kind of went up front, and that was a different part of the game, and it was a little more open than I think we would have liked, and we'll get to the second half. There were so many things I like that he did. Gosh, there was just one moment I was frustrated. In fact, it was a moment he took a shot. Do you guys remember the shot he takes top of the box? It's blocked. It's a really nice little, maybe it's a slip ball from Timber in him. We'll get to Timber in a moment. Or it's a slip ball from Saliba. It gets to Havertz at the top of the box, and both, maybe it's Martinelli and Nketiah or something, make good little runs. It's all set up for him to just flick it over the defenders and get in. He instead turns back away from them and takes the shot. That little understanding is going to come, but I thought his ball recoveries were good. His position was good. Paul, one of the things that's hard about an instant reaction is it's meant to be our emotional, in-the-moment reaction to the game. And I kind of sided with you a little bit. I think you had Havertz as a stock falling because you called him the invisible man. I agree that I didn't. And by the way, I'm only doing this to make sure you get maximum criticism for it. Because I can't take all of the social media pressure. I just need to share it with you. No, the reason I bring it up is interesting. I think on first watch, I wasn't as aware of his involvement. When I rewatch, and we had a very heavy right side bias, especially in the first half, which contributed to that a little bit. But he filled in and did so many of the things we want that position to do. The irony is, if that had been Granit Xhaka playing that game, we would have said it was like the perfect left center mid kind of performance. But because we're sort of expecting a more offensively explosive contribution from Havertz, maybe we didn't see as much of that. I think all around he did really good work though, Paul. So I'm curious if on rewatching and time to think about it, what, if anything, has changed? Or are you going to stick to your guns and can continue to take the massive weight of abuse on social media?
Yeah, I got some heat over that. I think the real issue here is it was too good a zinger, the invisible man. It's just, it was like...
You liked the turn of phrase, but you didn't think through the repercussions.
Yeah, it was just too good. Maybe not, I'm not saying it was accurate or true. It was just too good a zinger. It's one of those things that hangs around beyond the opinion or the view. I didn't say it was bad. We forget what stock falling is, right? I had an expectation of what I was going to see with Kai Havertz, and he didn't pop for me offensively. And like to point the finger at Clive, he does a little thing, and he says if he had to give a stock falling, and he kind of mentions Havertz, and then he takes it back, and then he says defensively, yeah, and without the ball, he was good, but he needed to show a little. Attacking, some additional attacking presence. And that's basically what I said. I thought his attacking presence, I expected a bit more pop. I rewatched it. Look, he's great. He's great for what he does for us. Great how he plays. I thought he could have been more decisive. Like, he had a couple of crap passes in the first half, and they catch your eye. There was like a couple of nothing balls where it could have been a something ball. He had that shot where if he got it off a little quicker, and those things stayed with me a little bit. And beyond that, attacking-wise, he didn't really do anything that popped. But he's still a big part of why we were so good, why there's so much movement. His pressing, counter-pressing, his movement, his intelligence, his switched-onness when we lose the ball. Look, he's great. But as a stock falling has not had a bad game. It's from what I expected to see. I expected a bit more sizzle from Havertz. I thought he was really good against City and sizzled. I thought his Monaco performance was maybe a bit like this when everybody was hammering. I was standing up for him. That he did a lot of stuff. You just don't appreciate it, everybody. And now I'm caught on the other side of that. To use Tim's word, it's a disjustice against me this time. Because I was so high on him. He was a little bit of a stock falling for me. And I zinged him with the invisible man. And now that's come back on me because it was too good a zinger. But look, he's great.
That's really the real problem is you were too clever is the problem. I've always thought so. Tim, that might be the issue.
If anything, you hit it too well.
Yeah, exactly. It is the interesting thing that I think one thing that was said in defense of Kai Havertz when he was at Chelsea is he was misused, or they never really knew which position to use him in or whatnot. I think this was also part of my lineup frustration, which again, I'm walking back because I see how it worked. And Mikel's comments, I think, are accurate as I read them out. But one of the things I think we really want to do to get Havertz firing is put him somewhere and tell him that's where you're playing. You know what I mean? Because that's the only way I think he's really going to get it. And to be fair, maybe that's what we did here. instead of playing him at 9, where he played against City and was quite good, 9 is not, assuming Gabriel Jesus gets fit and stays fit, which we hope will happen, 9 is not Havertz's role. This position is his role. So maybe Mikel was saying, all right, here you go. You're going to start the season in the role that I had in mind for you, and you're going to have to learn it. I don't know. But like, in terms of the way these pieces fit together, the Rice, Partey, Havertz, Odegaard, that whole section, it's going to be an interesting integration to see. So what are your early thoughts on, I don't think it's an accident. All 3 new signings started today, in the game. They definitely didn't start today. None of the new signings started today. Shock. We wasted all that money. Not one of them has started today. They all started in this game. I don't think that's by accident. What are your early returns seeing them all out there together in terms of the way they sort of fit?
Yeah, sure. I've talked a lot about Timber in pre-season, and nothing changed really. I thought he was really good, and actually, I think him coming off destabilised us a little bit. But with and Anna spoke a bit about Rice there as well. I kind of think that Havertz is the meatier one, and we had like a good discussion about this on our WhatsApp. Now, but before I say this, I really want to be wary about doing he does loads of stuff that you just can't see kind of stuff. And like when you're in the stadium, you get it, because I thought he was really useful in this game. That's the word I'd use. And I do think he might be a difficult player to appreciate, but at the same time, I don't want to pull that I was in the stadium and I saw all this, because my mate John, who I sit with, who sits right next to me, thought he was rubbish. So and I
what's the expression when you watch the game you don't see Busquets, when you watch Busquets you see the whole game? That was actually about Kai Havertz.
So the thing is, I mean, no one seems to know whether Havertz is like an 8, a 10 or a 9, and the truth is, from what I've seen so far, we're going to ask him to do all of those things depending on where the ball is and what the game state is. I think we ask him to do exactly the same things, basically, just in slightly different areas of the pitch. And one of the things that, and maybe this has slightly prejudiced my opinion because I was too impressed with the fact that when Ramsdale had the ball, Havertz was up front. When Nketiah was on, when Trossard was on, when Ramsdale had the ball at his feet, Havertz was the 9, Nketiah dropped off. And that makes tons of sense, particularly if you're doing like a bit of a counter-pressing game, because Havertz is far more likely to win the ball than probably anyone else. And all the counter-pressing stuff he was doing, as much as, Xhaka looked really good in that role, he can't really do that stuff like Havertz can. And the way he was drifting out to the left to allow Martinelli to go in field, I think there's a couple more dimensions here. I'm not going to sit here and tell you I thought he was absolutely amazing. I thought he was like 7 out of 10. But in terms of like the counter-pressing, the nicking the ball off people, and when we got in trouble in this game in the last few minutes, we put him up front. Unfortunately, he was knackered. He was absolutely cooked. He could barely run. And one of my criticisms of Mikel for this game is he only made 3 of his 5 substitutions. And when he made that third one, I really wanted to see a triple substitution, because this is the first game of the season and a lot of those guys were tired and we were hanging on. So unfortunately, if he'd been a little less cooked, if this had been September or October, like the best chances we made in the second half were just going route 1 to Havertz. Like that panic forest, particularly because initially when Martinelli came off, me and John, who might as well be on this podcast because I'm going to tell you everything he told me about the game.
Perfect.
We were both like, why are you taking Martinelli off? Like, we're playing on the counter. Like, he's the one who's going to hit that space. And actually it was Havertz going over the top to Havertz, like panicked them. And we made some good chances from it. So I think he was really useful in this game in a number of phases, in a number of different ways. It is going to take some time. And I do think body language wise, he's got that Ozil thing going on. So yeah, we'll see. But I thought he was very useful in this game. And I think it's no coincidence he stayed on.
Yeah, agree. Can I ask you one more thing about that though, Tim, just quickly from the ground? Because I know how it transmits on TV. Sometimes I think that Havertz is just one of those players who there's something about the length of him and the way he runs and the way he plays that the body language transmits almost a lackadaisical quality. I said this to Paul on the instant. Yeah, I used that word. I said to Paul on the instant reaction that you remember the time where he wins the duel on the long ball at halfway and then he sprints away. He just can't quite get away from the last man.
Yeah.
Even when he's doing that, he looks like he's just casual, but he's like won a duel and he's sprinting away. Like, do you get that sense in the ground that sometimes there's just something that transmits about the player?
Yeah.
That sends a message of almost like disinterest or lackadaisicalness. That's not a word, but you get my idea. That isn't real. I'm not saying it's true, but does that impact how people respond to him? Because we all know those players like Francis Coquelin who would run around like their hair was on fire, but aren't very good, as Paul will tell you. But then you got guys like Kai Havertz who maybe a bit of the opposite.
Yeah. There's definitely a bit of that to it. I think like possibly the other thing about Havertz that I picked up from this game is that he's maybe got to learn that pressing isn't just about winning the ball. Like he's great at winning the ball back, but that's not the only reason you press. You press to like cut off passing lanes and stuff like that. And I think he's much more opportunistic. He's like, oh, I can win the ball here. And he's really good at judging that. And also because he's got go gadget legs. You know, he can really come out of nowhere and kind of and wrap
him
them
and
around
Rice.
you.
I was just thinking they both have that extendable leg thing where they reach in for different purposes, but they both have the telescopic leg for the tackle.
Yeah, definitely. But I think the thing I probably picked up from this game is like even if you're not going to get the ball, press because you'll force them sideways or backwards or whatever. But like I say, I do think physically he was pretty cooked with about 20 minutes to go.
That is one thing I think we could all probably agree. None of us know this for sure. Can I just say we're talking about this at a distance and none of us know this for sure, but like we have seemed not quite fit yet as a group. Like Rice has looked absolutely shagged out on about an hour or 70 minutes of games. Martinelli always looks that way a bit. Havertz looked really spent in this game. I think we are still really trying to get our fitness up, Paul. And that may explain some of what happened late in this game because I just think we had a group of players out there that weren't super fit. It will get to the subs thing, which I'd like to get to at some point. Can we just put a pin in that for 1 second? I want to ask you. So
I want to talk fitness.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Hit me with a fitness thought.
Yeah, I wanted to stay on your point.
Yeah. Perfect.
I'm doing my rewatch, but I've only got 60 minutes in. We are walking. We're knackered in the second half, and it'll lead into the subs conversation a bit later on. But like, I think Arteta came out of last season, and everything he did is about the run-in from last season, the lesson learned, the matchup against City. Our signings during the summer are about City. I suspect maybe the preparation in pre-season is about City. There are some teams and some coaches who absolutely fry their players in preseason so they're ready to go game one. And that was probably us last season. This season, I just wonder, maybe it's just coincidence, maybe I'm just projecting, if what we are doing is planning our fitness and our preparation so that we get stronger and stronger and fitter as the season goes on, and that the first game, you could look at this first game from three different angles and say, Mikel wasn't sweating this game. He assumed we were going to win it. We have a relatively easier start to our season than normal. Fixtures we can win. And I think maybe he hasn't gone as intense or as defined or as absolutely tuned on selections, on fitness and everything, because he's doing a build, he's trying things out. There's a degree of experimentation. And like in the second half, we are strolling, we are walking. These guys are tired. They're not fully fit. Saliba he has extra reasons, but he talked about how he's not there yet. Rice isn't there yet for other reasons. I think lots of us aren't there yet in terms of this team. And that's why you had a first half and a totally different second half with players not even asked to run into different positions. They kind of had set positions in the second half, and we played within ourselves.
This last thing I want to say before we start to talk a little bit on Nketiah, his goal, his performance, the lackadaisical second half, subs or not subs, why it got too close for comfort late. There's a lot still left to discuss there. This is this is one of those things that I just think I have absolutely no ability to provide any insight, nor does Tim, nor does Paul. So we'll get into it now. Just quickly, I think it is a little weird that Timber came back out for the second half. That's all. That's all I'll say. Mikel said that the physios said he was cleared to go back out. I mean, he went down with the same thing when he went back out, and it fully seemed to go, whatever it is. Hopefully he's okay. I've read some of the, people like Dr. Raj who analyze injuries online, and, they're fully put in the caveats that you're analyzing it online. You know what you know. Seem to have a fairly positive read on what that might be. We did lose our team doctor to Manchester United in the offseason, right? Gary O'Driscoll, but it's a little weird.
Is he still there?
Is he still there?
Wasn't it? He would go when they found the replacement. That was certainly some of the dialogue yesterday. But anyway,
I'll have to look.
Maybe he's mentally gone.
Maybe he's already mentally with United, and he's like, yeah, Jurian, you're fine. You're in. Go back. No, it hasn't popped. I promise. Go back out. You're going to be, oops, it popped. No, I'm kidding. That's not a laughing matter. But I guess all I'm saying is I think it is fair to raise an eyebrow and be like, weird that we let him go back out there with a 2-goal lead against Forest when something was clearly bothering him. But it is very, very Arsenal to have brought in a guy to back up our injury-prone left back. That guy looks fucking sensational all summer, and in the first game does something to the back of his knee and now may be out. And we may be looking at our third choice left back playing in our second game. Now, hopefully not. Zinchenko might be fine, by the way. So we'll see. It could be okay timing, 1 in, 1 out. We'll get to that when the time comes. I don't think we should go any deeper on that, though, because hypothesizing about injuries and whether he could have gone back out there, like I said, we have nothing we can really add to that. So I think what we can add to, the thing where we can really bring maximum value is to your health. It's one thing to bring you maximum value in terms of understanding football. I don't know about that, but I can tell you that if you want to be healthy, you should try AG1. That's right. AG1. And they have changed their URL. So I want to let you know it is now drinkag1.com/vision. Drinkag1.com/vision. What is AG1? It's 75 high quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, adaptogens, probiotics. I started drinking AG1 because I had gut health issues. I had a friend who recommended it. I started taking it. It was great for that aspect, that situation that I had in my gut that you don't need or want any more details on. But I found that it was good for energy. I was taking more caffeine than I needed in. I was probably relying on coffee too much. Now I'm able to have my 1 cup of coffee in the day, but I feel energetic throughout the day. I start it right in the morning, feel great. It was designed by athletes, so great for recovery, great for mindfulness and restfulness at the end of the day. Something that you can go ahead and try from a company that is, built by athletes for athletes. That was the science behind this to begin with. So AG1, what do you need to do? Well, if a comprehensive solution is what you need from your supplement routine, try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first purchase. Go to drinkag1.com/vision. That's drinkag1.com/vision. I cannot say it any more clearly than that. And now, word from our sponsor, BetterHelp. Look, it is the absolute purest truth there is that the most important part of your body that you can take care of is your mind, and it is the one that you are most frequently losing. I mean, we're all football fans. We're regularly losing our minds. We need to take care of our minds. It's not a laughing matter. In fact, I think thinking about a healthy brain should be no different than thinking about a healthy body. Right? You get enough sleep, you try to eat right, you try to exercise, you know the importance of that, but then you're like, my mind will just be fine. Well, it won't be fine. You need professionals to help you with it. Why shouldn't you? I will say I did therapy. It is one of the best things I've ever done for myself. Not because I was in crisis, but because I wanted to live a fuller, happier, healthier life. And I knew that I could use a little help in that area. You don't have to be in crisis. Don't wait till you're in crisis. You don't wait till your car breaks down. You get it checked up. Keep your brain checked up. And by the way, with BetterHelp, you can go online. You can do it with camera on. You can do it with camera off. You can make it comfortable. You don't have to get in the car. You don't have to go to an office. You don't have to go find someone. I have to go to the office. I don't have time for that. Who has time for that? All you got to do is turn on your computer, go to the website. You look at the website, go to the camera, and you do it. God, so obvious. Our listeners get 10% off their first month at BetterHelp.com/vision. That's BetterHelp, HELP, BetterHelp.com/vision. Do it now, Tim. Is that enough of that?
Indeed.
You have nailed it. Back up and running. get the word out on the street. We back up. I want to remind everybody that Harry Kane has maintained his impressive record of never winning a trophy. Just very, very important to note that Harry Kane went to Bayern Munich and has brought the legendary Tottenham Hotspur influence to Bayern Munich, successfully not winning a trophy within one day of arriving at Bayern Munich. And Thomas Tuchel, in true Thomas Tuchel form, digging out all his players, including Harry Kane. Love what's happening there. Love what you're cooking, Tuchel. Keep it up. And based on watching Tottenham Hotspur, I think they're in for a long, long season themselves. So, Tim, Eddie Nketiah. I want to say something from the heart. One of the hardest things about all football conversations, the biggest arguments I see on Discord, the biggest ones I get into on Twitter, at their core, what they ultimately wind up being is I rate player X higher than you rate player X, or I rate player X lower than you rate player X. And as silly as it sounds, that winds up being the single biggest cause of arguments. We shouldn't sign that guy. He stinks. You're an idiot. That guy's great. That kind of stuff. We shouldn't start this guy. He stinks. This guy's great. And it winds up being a binary too, unfortunately, right? He stinks or he's great. Messi is the GOAT or Pessi is finished. You know, it's one or the other. The yin and the yang of football. Pessi is finished. Pinaldo is finished. I have to admit, and I want to say this because I think it's important. I recognize my bias. I have not really ever rated Nketiah that highly. I think Eddie Nketiah looks like a player who could go to a certain team in the Premier League and really be a good goal scorer for them and give someone 14, 15 goals in a season and be really impactful. His underlying metrics have always been good. He has a pretty good goal scoring record. I have always struggled to see Eddie Nketiah as being a really clean fit for how we want to play. Mm-hmm. And as a result, I accept that bleeds into my analysis. That as I watched this game, I was very keenly aware of the things I thought Eddie wasn't necessarily getting right in terms of when to drop in and show your boots. I wanted him to show his boots more. You know, he really made some interesting runs, some good diagonal runs, some good runs along the back line. He scores a beautifully taken goal, right? I mean, he gets a little deflection fair, but he scores a goal to open the game. You need that. And his record for that is good. And yet I find myself saying, show your boots more there. Get over that header a little more, keep your eyes up. Like, some players you're just going to be harder on than others. So I'm going to admit that I have that bias. I'm going to do my best to analyze him in a clear-eyed way and strip that bias away from my analysis and try to be open to where he can give us a lot of good things. Because it is important to do that. But I just wanted to start by saying that because I think it is only fair to acknowledge that sometimes we have a player that we just don't see it. I never saw with Olivier Giroud. I wasn't shy about that, right? And that guy's only France's all-time leading scorer, and he's won every trophy that exists in football. And he's very handsome as well. So maybe I have a problem with handsome players. But Tim, I'm going to ask you now that I've laid myself bare, what you thought of this performance in the center forward position, because until Jesus comes back, and if Jesus's fitness is a question this season, I think Leandro Trossard's going to have an argument that he wants that position. I think Kai Havertz has an ability to play that position, and Eddie got his shot this game, and he did what you need to do when you're the center forward. He scored. So what's your take on that role?
Yeah, I have to lay down a lot of the same caveats. One of the things I tried to do, probably failed on the basis of yesterday, but because I have a lot of the same reservations. I think he's a good player. I'm not sure he's an Arteta player or an Arsenal player, but he's a good player. But I always felt he'd start this game. I felt that was partly... Yes, you did.
I gave you credit on the instant reaction for that, though.
I heard that, thank you. But I always felt he'd start this game kind of because of the game and the opposition. It was just like, it's Forest. We're probably going to need someone to bang one in the penalty area. And that's exactly what he does. And I kind of... So before I go to the goal and everything else, like... I've tried to kind of clean my slate with Eddie this year, just because I felt like we lost him a bit last year. Like Trossard came in and then he got injured, and it wasn't really clear whether he'd been ousted or whether there was an injury there. Or do you know what I mean? And and I've said a lot during pre-season. I felt like a lot of pre-season was about like reintegrating and puffing him back up a little bit. Like I think giving him the captaincy for the Emirates Cup game against Monaco, like that felt pointed to me. Like that felt like usually you say pointed when it's like kind of a bad thing, and it's not. That felt like look, you're going to be an important player this year. We value you. We want you. That's why I thought he was going to start this game. As much as it being Nottingham Forest, I think there was something about showing him some trust. You know, he had like a decent pre-season and he clearly put the work in, and it was like, okay, I'm going to reward you for that. We know Arteta's big on that. So, you know, I've tried to clean my slate as well and go, okay, I feel like Arteta's trying to like bring him back in. So maybe I should, because like, I know I do that, right? When I think a player's going to go, I push them away mentally, like Smith Rowe. Like, I kind of didn't really want to talk about Smith Rowe at the end of last season because I thought he was going to get sold, and he didn't. And therefore, and it's the same with Tierney. I kind of think Tierney's out the door, so I don't really think about him that much. So I was like, okay, Eddie's like, I don't. We talked about this in pre-season. Like, I think who plays that number 9 when Jesus isn't there will depend on the opposition. I'm not convinced that Eddie will start at Selhurst Park. Maybe the goal gets him that. But anyway, all of that kind of considered, I probably haven't entirely cleaned my slate, because my kind of assessment of Eddie in this game is we learn nothing about him in terms of when he had the ball in the penalty area and he was facing the goal. Fantastic. That's really well taken. Lovely touch to get it out of his stride. Understands there's lots of bodies in the way, so power is required, and he gets the deflection he needs. I kind of think, not playing explicitly for it, but you blast it there and there's loads of bodies in the way, there's a good chance it's going to happen. Excellent. Second half in particular, honestly, he touched the ball on about the 65th minute, and I was honestly like, I forgot he was on. Like, that's not entirely his fault, because there were a lot of guys I couldn't find with the torch in the second half, to be honest. But I literally was like, is that the first time he's touched the ball in the second half? Like, I admit I kind of knocked off a little bit when it went to 2-0 mentally. I think the team did as well. And so I probably wasn't laser focused, because I was just thinking it's going to be 3-4-0 now. So maybe he did some stuff I missed when I was less attentive, but I couldn't find him with a torch in that second half. I just really couldn't. Even his off the, like, I don't know, maybe I was just too like starstruck by Havertz going up front when there was a goal kick. And maybe I was just so impressed by that for some reason. But do you know what I mean? I just, it didn't, I was going to say jump off the screen. I was in the state. It didn't jump off the grass at me, and maybe I'm being unfair, but yeah.
To be fair to your intuition, in the first 15 minutes of the second half, Eddie Nketiah had one touch, and it was right on the right touch line in midfield. So you aren't totally wrong about
Remember
that.
I talked about that thing I thought was weird, which was Havertz was moved into the middle. And I specifically said standing in the spot that Eddie would drop into. And because we were so, we were at walking pace, this isn't an excuse. This is pure explanation. It was kind of odd. It was almost like Havertz was moved into a redundant spot, because that's where Eddie would have got his touches, because we weren't in their penalty box. We weren't attacking the attacking third. The play was kind of going on. It was kind of, I didn't quite get the second half. I didn't quite get why we, like, Rice was up in the left 8 spot, so it certainly wasn't Havertz in that spot. It wasn't even like he was moving in and out of it. He was just sitting in that spot in the second half. It was kind of odd. I do agree. Like, I'm an Eddie booster, Eddie fan, been backing him for years. But I agree with you guys. I think he suits a different style, a different team, maybe even slightly a different era of football, because it's not just us who plays like this anymore. It's like almost every team is expecting your striker to not be a striker most of the game, to do other things. And he's worked on that and he's got better, but he's not great at it. I thought this was a really good goal from him. I think some people thought it was okay and it was a deflection. Like, this is a classic Eddie goal. It's scripted. It's like a software subroutine that he's run 1,000 times. And Arteta's talked about how he would have to have been blind in training this week not to have picked Eddie because of how good he's been. And if you think of training is probably on a smaller pitch with a more crowded space with lots of situations where Eddie is going to be in the box type situations, getting a chance to finish. I suspect he's been banging in these in all week. If you remember that goal last season against United where he spins, turns into the box and puts it in the far corner, and you felt that's a goal he's done 1,000 times in training, and that's Eddie in the box, crafted, professional. The way he moves, shifts, and bangs this with power, kind of heads down. People, Scott was asking, should he have, because I think Havertz is open on the right-hand side of the box.
Odegaard is screaming.
It's Odegaard, is it? Okay.
Well, Havertz is unmarked on the other side of the box, but Odegaard is right there screaming for it, yeah.
Yeah, so there's two guys he could pass to, but like once he hits the button for the subroutine, he knows, and he earns that deflection because he absolutely has the defender scrambling to stay with him because he does that shift, he does the knock, he does that's great Eddie, it's classic Eddie. I do think there are teams for him in the Premier League, but there's fewer and fewer of them because more and more of them ask their striker to do all that non-striker stuff. So it's. I thought he might look to move this season because I agree. I'd pick Jesus, then Havertz, then Trossard as my first three. Once we get into the thick of this season, I think this was a game that Arteta felt he could do a couple of things, give a guy a game.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. No, keep going because really? I think you're on. Yeah, keep going. Yeah.
Well, that's really it. I think in the second half, Havertz was standing in his spot. I didn't really get it, and it's not like our play justified our setup. I mean, I'm looking at it here, and like there's no pretense about Partey being a fullback. He's standing in the DM spot, and Rice is Xhaka, and Havertz is standing in the middle of the pitch, never moving from it.
It's interesting, though. I mean, there was definitely sterile domination in the second half, but in a way, when you're 2-0 up, I think about this for a second.
I get it.
So think about this. From halftime to the 68th minute, we had 82% possession. They took 0 shots. Now, we only took 1 shot in that period, but we're 2-0 up. We've conceded 0 shots and had 82% of the ball. That's what would be described as a very professional way to kill a game. I just think.
And we don't have the energy to press
we wind up letting them get a goal, right? And then when they get a goal, suddenly it doesn't feel professional. It feels like it was lackadaisical. I want to read you the quotes from Mikel because you brought him up, though. And it's interesting in a way because the quotes Mikel says here could apply to Leo Trossard, which I want to ask you about, Tim, because it's interesting. This can cut both ways. But he says, Eddie sums up what we want this season in terms of the squad. He was a player who was really disappointed not to start against City in the absence of Gabby Jesus. But he had an incredible impact in the game against City, and he trained this week like a beast. A lot of players ask, why am I not playing? And the thing is that Eddie is telling you, look at all the reasons I'm giving you to play me. When you play him, after you know you're going to have that response, because he's not looking for excuses or anything. He's looking at his own performance and what he can do for the team. This is the example that everyone has to look at. It reminds me a bit of the scene in the All or Nothing documentary when Samby's being a little down in the dumps about not playing more. And Eddie's like, a lot of us aren't playing as much as we want, mate. You just, keep working at it, basically. And Eddie has done that. And I think Paul hit on something big here, Tim. I think Mikel looked at this game and said, I didn't play Eddie against City. I don't know if I'm going to play Eddie away at Palace. I'm not going to have tons of opportunities to start him. I'm going to use him, but I've got Jesus coming back. I've got Trossard chomping at the bit. Because, by the way, everything he said about Eddie deserving to start, Trossard could say he deserves it too with the way he's played in preseason and so on. So maybe, just maybe, Mikel looked at this and said, Forest at home. I'm going to have a lot of good players on that pitch. Eddie has a good track record of scoring. I'm going to pick Eddie here because it's a chance for me to do it and reward him and show there's a meritocracy here. And I think it's a masterstroke because he gets away with it, right? It works. He gets his goal. He looks like he made the right call. It transmits great message to the rest of the squad, especially the players who aren't starting. Trossard then comes on, and by the way, I thought Trossard was excellent in his little appearance there and really made a difference. So what do you think of those comments and Mikel finding the opportunity to start a player who might be on the outside looking in most cases, but now is going to feel that the manager does back him and is trying to bring him in, and how that might transmit to other players in similar situations in the squad?
Yeah, definitely. It's all part of what I perceive to be like a reintegration in terms of we're going to need this player, we want this player, we got to make him feel wanted because it doesn't look like we're open to selling him or anything. Like for example, Tierney doesn't come on in this game, and I
He
think
wasn't in this. He wasn't in the team.
what. Yeah,
in
yeah,
the
yeah.
squad. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, and so we know why that is, right?
Yeah.
We're not trying to reintegrate him, but we're trying to reintegrate Eddie. We spent a lot of preseason, Emil Smith-Rowe and Fabio Vieira. I know they don't come on in this game, but like he spent a lot of preseason, I think, trying to welcome those guys back in. I think also we do massively underestimate, probably because we don't see it, we massively underestimate how much training matters, both in terms of creating that environment where everyone just kind of goes, and like to all the guys who aren't in the like to Smith-Rowe and Vieira, right, who didn't get on, and that might not be their fault. That maybe if Timber wasn't injured, maybe if we were 3-0 up, they would have got on. I don't know, but like for them, there's a kind of but Eddie was in this position a week ago, and he started and he scored. That could be me next week. And I remember asking Jonas Eidevall something about this, the Arsenal women coach last season, because Arsenal played in the League Cup final and they have a situation in the squad where they have two right backs who are very, very equal in terms of ability. But one of them had been playing. He brought the other one in for that final against Chelsea, Noel Maritz, and I asked him about it. And I asked him a big highfalutin tactical question like, is this because on their left-hand side they have this player and Noel's like really good in one-on-ones? And he just said, nope, she just trained like a beast. And he said like she trained like a beast all week. And I just felt, so when it came time to pick the team, I was just like, she's on it, and I'll get a performance from her. And it was as simple as that. Like there wasn't like a big tactical or even like an environmental thing. It was just like when it came time to name the team, I just, from how she trained, I had the feeling she'd perform. And that could have been what's happened here as well. Maybe this time last week he was minded to start Havertz up front. Maybe he was, but maybe Eddie went and changed that in training. And I think that's stuff that we don't, because we don't see it, we don't really think of. And that is important to coaches, both in terms of the individual performance, and you're right, and the message it sends everyone else, particularly if we're going to do this more rotational thing.
Well said. I think keeping everybody engaged is important. Picking the best team is obviously important as well, using the right players. Paul, I'm just going to ask you this question without any lead-in because I think it's relevant. Should Mikel sub earlier and more often?
Look, I think that's a thing. The answer is yes. It's something he's going to learn over time. There's no formula. It's something you feel in the game with everything that's going on, and we've only gotten to being good in the last season or so. And last season won't be this season. And reading games and situations, it's one of the European competitions. Will we be any good in Europe? Will Mikel be good at running a European campaign? Not at first. That's something, again, you feel when you rotate, when you switch. You go from 2 dimensions to 3 dimensions in terms of complexity, the number of variables. Now, the subs in this game, look, I think this was a game he wanted it to play out. I think he wanted to do different things and try different things. And we were tired. And the obvious thing is, like, we're starting to walk at 60 minutes. We should have been making subs and blah, blah, blah. If this was the only game that ever mattered and the season rested on this game, I bet you Mikel would have made subs earlier and fresher. But he wanted to see this kind of a setup with these kinds of players. And as soon as he brought in other players, he was changing the dynamic. And we're all saying, well, yes, he should have changed the dynamic earlier. Whereas I don't know what he was looking at, but I suspect from a fitness standpoint, he was happy with these guys getting extra minutes in their legs. The guys who were on, like, you're tired, you should get Bukayo Saka off at 60 minutes. No, he's tired. You should keep him on to get that fitness going. That's how you build your fitness. So there's a whole fitness thing going on. There's a whole, he's playing out the experiment. Or the other answer is, yeah, he left his subs too long.
Yeah. I mean, their goal was very much just fresh legs against tired legs. Two fast guys sprinting up the pitch, and we couldn't run with them. I mean, Thomas Partey, look, he's not a 90-minute player, and he really never has been for us. Against City, they get a goal when Partey pushes up unadvisedly, doesn't get there, and then can't track back. Right after the Forest goal, like 1 minute after it, they have a good shot first time from the top of the box where if the guy's a little more composure, I think he does better. Because what does Thomas Partey do? He presses up. He doesn't get there. He's a bit lazy with the tackle and slow, and then he can't recover. I'm sort of surprised, for example, Jorginho didn't come on for Partey. You know, that's a player you can bring on. That was an option he had available. He didn't take it. You know, and that could backfire, by the way, or Kiwi or whatever. I don't know. It is weird, I think, a little bit in this game, as comfortable as it was, but we're starting to flag a little bit. And we're starting to not. Forget the enforced Urian Timber sub. His first sub is at 74 minutes. Eddie for Nketiah, Eddie for Trossard. And the only other sub he makes is Gabriel for Gabriel, right? Magalhaes for Martinelli at 86 minutes. By the way, I'm not getting stuck in. I just think it's a little odd. We have a much deeper squad. We had some good options on the bench. And I think it is not, I think there's enough of a trend here to say that Mikel doesn't do much of this. Tim, I just think keeping it fresh in situations like that, right? Because one of the things that made this performance so comfortable is we were dominating them in possession and we were counter-pressing really well. And as the second half wore on, the counter-press really started to slow down, and then the possession started to even out. In fact, from around the time they scored their goal to full time, it's 50-50 in possession. And in fact, the last 10 minutes of the game, they outpossess us, I think 54 to 46, something like that. I know Giant Gooder, for example, on Twitter was saying the thing he hated about the end of this game wasn't, that they were super dangerous or anything like that, just that we didn't get our foot on the ball and control it. And I think it's because we were starting to lose the physical battles. Now, ironically, we looked our most dangerous in the second half at 2-1 because we did play on the counter a bit. But I thought we let it become basketball a little too much when we could have stood to maybe just stand on the ball, get it under possession and keep it. So what do you think about that? The maybe using subs to freshen up and get that control back, and the way we played the end game of this game, letting it be a little too back and forth and maybe not enough. And not that I'm saying they created a ton of danger, because I felt nervous, as you will, at 2-1. Mostly they didn't create much, but we definitely didn't feel like we had it. We didn't have the ball as much as I would like in that last 10 minutes. Yeah,
definitely. I thought the second half was quite poorly managed overall. I agree on the subs. And look, let me tell you the emotional journey I felt in this second half. So sometimes I think like fans and athletes are different beasts in a lot of ways, and those things can rub up against each other. True. But I'm kind of convinced that the Arsenal players and the Arsenal fans experienced a lot of this game the same way, which is as soon as it went 2-0, we're all sitting there, myself included, very much included, just going, right, here we go. It's going to be 3-4-0, lovely day in the sun. A bit like those last games of the season against Everton and Wolves. Like, here we go. This is going to be nice. And then I kind of just like mentally tapped out of the game a little bit. And then it got to about, and so clearly, I think for the purpose of this analysis, we've got to look at it through Nottingham Forest's lens here. What do you think they were saying at half time? They'd have been saying, just keep it 2-0, nothing silly. Keep it 2-0 as long as possible, and they've got the guys that can play on the break in exactly the way that they did and got the goal. They'd have been like, just keep it 2-0 as long as possible, and then we'll go the last 20 minutes. And if we get a goal back off either a set piece or a counter, they'll rock. And that is exactly what happened. So we've got to acknowledge, I think, that Nottingham Forest's game plan pretty much came off, and that's our fault. And so I think there's definitely something about the substitutions, but the way I was thinking about it, it got to like 65 minutes. I almost looked at the scoreboard because I was like, still only 2-0. Like mentally, I was at 4-0 10 minutes ago, but it's actually still only 2-0. And you start to get that they only need like a counter-attack or a set piece, and this is a completely different game. And then I think everyone starts to feel that way, and you get a slight edginess from about 65 to 75 minutes, and you get to 75 minutes and you start to kind of panic. And the conversations I was having with the people I was with was like, we all said, we were like, I don't like this. I think they're going to score. And I had that feeling, and maybe that's just fan intuition. Maybe that's just, just kind of dramatize, making things more dramatic in your head because you're emotionally involved in the game. But we were like, I think there's something coming here. And that's exactly what happened. And by the way, where Partey gets cooked for their goal, it happened a minute earlier as well, a couple of minutes earlier, and we were like, he's got to come off.
To be fair, he gets cooked for their chance right after the goal. I actually think it's Saka off. It's our
Saka
corner
runs
for their
back.
goal. Yeah, and he's trying to run back.
It happened before as well, where Saka was running back, and like Saka was basically playing right back, and he had to read that situation and just be like no one's put Thomas Partey there to play right back. He was there to play midfield. He should foul him in
the first phase, is what he should. That's what City does, by the way.
Yeah. And
if Bukayo Saka just drags the guy down, maybe he gets yellow, maybe he doesn't because it's so high up the pitch. That's how City keeps those kind of things from happening.
Yeah. But Partey, like, even when he's not physically cooked, he's not a defender. That's not why we put him at right back. Yeah. And that's what that phase of the game called for.
Great point.
He brought Gabriel on as soon as they scored. Like, I'm sorry, that should have happened 5-10 minutes earlier. He should have read that situation. He didn't. And I really think we allowed the game to creep. We sleptwalked into it. And yeah, the biggest criticism I can give is this is exactly what Nottingham Forest wanted from that second half. They just didn't quite get the second goal. And that's down to us mismanaging the half. And I think that Arteta would do well to learn from that. I'd only say on the subs thing quickly, I hope it was just about trying to get some fitness in because it's early in the season, and I hope that I agree with you, we don't look as physically on the level as we did this time last season, but we all understand what happened last season. We were done by April, so if they're trying to do things differently there, fine. But I mean, I guess Guardiola is not one for subs either, and so maybe Arteta's the same.
Yeah, and just to throw it out there, the XG in this game was Arsenal 0.8, Forest 1.1. Now realize, almost all of that XG for Forest comes from the weird back header that sends them in the first half and the goal they score from point blank range. Still counts. It may be, if anything, it's the fact that we just didn't create more threat in this game. And I think back to last season, didn't City need a late penalty to beat Leicester at the Etihad? I think that was the game they got a late penalty. They dropped points to Everton at home at the Etihad. When teams come to your place with no intention to play and can keep it close for a while, it can be really, really difficult. Job one is don't fall behind early, which we almost did in this game, to be fair, but we didn't. Job two is get that first goal so they can't just sit back. We did that. We got the second goal, and this is where I think the Bukayo Saka factor, having that force of nature player who can pull out the spectacular, you need that in games like this. And then we just maybe rode the wrong side of the line between professionalism in the second half and overconfidence. Maybe we strutted a little too much of the we're title favorites and your relegation favorite stuff, because in the second half, we created next to nothing until, ironically, it went to 2-1 and the game opened up a bit. I think that's the part that Mikel's going to be looking at. I think the subs could have helped in that regard, right? I mean, he had some good players on the bench. He could have called on a little sooner. I agree with him there. But all in all, it's a tough league. I mean, Mikel had a big smile on his face. He said, this is a Premier League. There are no easy games. Anyone can hurt you. He's not wrong. And we do get the 3 points. And I don't want to be a Pollyanna who doesn't look at the warts on the performance and says they don't matter. I remember once upon a time, people did not enjoy us bringing up XG when Unai Emery was reeling off 26 games consecutive without dropping points. And people are like, why can't you just enjoy this? And like, on the one hand, you're right, you should enjoy wins. On the other hand, you want to analyze the warts on those performances to see if there's something there. I don't think there's a there with this. I do think that the biggest thing I'll take away from this game, other than the positives, is that I still don't think we're fully cooked physically. And that's going to be something Mikel's going to have to manage. And I'll be curious to see how he manages that. Obviously, we're going to have to hope.
I don't think Arteta thinks the issue is our legs weren't fresh enough. I think a bit like the thing last year with Saka needs to be able to play 75 games. He thinks the answer should have been on the pitch. Like they
Obviously, he
beat
left
us.
them out there.
Yeah, they beat us off an attacking corner and a broken play, and we had
They
4
did
or
what to
5
us?
guys. Yeah,
Just kidding, keep going.
yeah, we had 4 or 5
Anyone
players
wants to
back
listen back
against
to
there
those few
too.
seconds will hear it. Anyway, go ahead. Yeah, please. Mhm.
Yeah, and I think he'll think the mistakes were made on the pitch, and that he wasn't sitting there looking at the second half saying, "Oh, we look a bit tired." And we keep doing the same things. He was shouting instructions to tweak, to change. Like, we think he didn't do anything. He did. He did it with the players on the pitch. Now, did he get it right? I don't know. Looks like he didn't. I think if this was for the title, for the season, he would have made subs, but it's not. It's the first game of the season, and he's trying things out, and he's finding solutions with the players on the pitch, and he doesn't think the answer is always fresh legs. But once they scored, he's like, oh shit, fresh legs. Screw the experiment. We're no longer 2 goals up. We're only 1 goal, and we're going to get nervous. Let's keep it simple. Let's get Gabriel on. Let's get some fresh legs and change things and get some energy. Get Declan Rice central, so that we have that cover there, and keep it simple. But while he had the 2-goal cushion and they had done nothing to us, he wanted to find the solutions on the pitch. That's my read of what he did here.
Yeah, and look, I don't like the idea of going to Crystal Palace away on a Monday night. I think it's going to be a really tough game. That was a tough game for us to open the season last season. It's just a hard place to play, I think. I think Mikel will relish the fact that he's got till Monday. He's got a lot more time to work with players, an extra day to get Zinchenko potentially back, see what's going on with Timber, really feel out a game plan, really go through the film of Palace's win over Sheffield United. I think Nottingham Forest looked organized, and I can't really argue with their performance. They were a worthy opponent, and we beat them. I'd like us to create more clear chances. I think that could happen as time goes by. We did this with 3 new players who weren't playing for us last season starting in this game. That's a lot. 2 of them in critical positions in central midfield or attacking midfield, and a striker who is our backup. And that is one thing, by the way, I didn't get to say when we talked about Eddie that I think is worth pointing out. Whatever you think of him, you think he's brilliant, you think he's decent, you think he's not so decent. I think it is always important to point out that Eddie Nketiah is a backup player for Arsenal. And as far as backup forwards go, that's a pretty good level. Especially when you consider the group behind Jesus is Havertz, Trossard, and Nketiah. That's a really good level. And it is very hard to argue with Eddie Nketiah as one of 4 choices at center forward when you look around at what some other teams are trying to put out there. Just look at what Chelsea were doing today. I think the other thing that strikes me from this weekend, Tim, I think maybe my assumptions about this season are going to be challenged. There aren't a lot of teams that look complete to me. We haven't seen United play yet. As we record this, they're going to be home to Wolves, so I expect them to win heavily and then hear how they are favorites to win the treble for a week or so. But, Liverpool have all kinds of problems. Chelsea have 432 players, and that's just going to be a headache for Poch, and they've got issues. I think Newcastle may come away from this weekend as the team that a lot of people, Newcastle and Brighton, people are going to say, well, if Spurs have this many issues and they don't have Harry Kane anymore, and Chelsea have this many issues and Liverpool have this many issues, could we be in for a really unpredictable season? And is it the case that maybe it's just that Arsenal and City, whatever you think of them, are the 2 most complete teams and will probably pull away from a league that's still trying to figure out what the hell they're about? Because there's a lot of weird teams in this league right now.
Yeah, it could be. It could be. I'm reluctant to say that after 1 round of games.
No. Lean in. Big conclusions.
To be honest, I watched, just watched Liverpool Chelsea. We've just finished watching that, and the first half, that game, I mean, it's great. It was a tire fire. Like neither team had a midfield. Neither team could defend. Great fun. They both kind of sorted it out in the second half, though. And teams can do that. I think Nottingham Forest did that to us yesterday. Like the first 20 minutes, I don't think they knew or 30 minutes or so, they didn't know what to do with us, but they kind of worked it out as the game went on and got stronger. And Forest have not had a good summer at all. There's lots of questions hanging over them recruitment wise, and Brennan Johnson plays in this game, but it looks like he's going to leave, and they got all sorts of financial issues and potential financial issues around payments, and you kind of think they're in disarray, but they looked all right. They looked good, and they sorted it out as the game went on. So, yeah, I think it could shape up that way. But I think I'm going to lay off a couple of weeks, couple of months, and particularly with Newcastle, great start for them. But Villa I think the Tyrone Mings injury really rocked Villa in this game, and I think this game kind of got away from them. And I think the challenge for Newcastle is not so much games like this, it's when the Champions League kicks in. I think that's why people have doubts over them repeating last season, and obviously all of that remains to be seen. And the same goes for us. Like, we're going to have to cope with that as well, and maybe in a month or 2 months' time, we'll have a better idea about that.
Yeah. Paul, you want to add?
Yeah, maybe a slightly different angle, but it's really bugging me at the moment. I keep listening to podcasts of, coverage from people.
Wait, other
respect.
Podcasts? It's us and ours. It's us and ours cast, mate. Stick to the core two. That's it. Okay.
Yeah, non-Arsenal podcasts, and I am astounded that nobody rates us. I listen to Second Captains, and it's great, and I really enjoy it. And they're smart guys, and they had John Bruin. They had I think it was Jonathan Wilson. Bruin picked a second. Everybody else was kind of waffly about his third or fourth. Now, I'm one of those people who would spend most of my time telling other people that they shouldn't worry about this stuff, and it doesn't matter, and who cares what the media think. But it's slightly freaking me out, and it's pissing me off. I listen to the TIFO, John McKenzie and the Scottish guy who's funny and good, and they're both very smart. And John McKenzie picks United. Everybody's picking United ahead of us. I don't get it. What is going on? And if they mention, they don't. Here's the other thing that pisses me off. If you think United is going to come second and we're going to come third or fourth, you would think there's a pregnant moment where you need to explain why Arsenal isn't the second best team in the league after last season, after how we played until the last 10 games. We've strengthened in the summer. We look better. We look like we've addressed the issues. And it is weird. The people don't even... Okay, you want to pick United second? Fine. Why are you picking United ahead of Arsenal? You should at least feel the compunction, the compulsion, the necessity to explain why Arsenal is not your set. And then they're like, I think United second, and Chelsea or whoever, Liverpool or Arsenal for third or fourth, maybe Liverpool, maybe. I'm like, what the fuck is going on, Elliot? What is going on? What has United done that has catapulted them to at least equal billing with us? And if they go ahead of us in your rankings, you don't need to explain why. What?
I mean, look.
And on the other hand, who cares? But I do. For once, I care.
I'm just going to read you the seminal, I'm not even, here it is. I'm going to read you the seminal tweet about United from a Twitter account that is locked, so there's no point with me even reading out. We need to stop engaging in football debates with United fans. That's all there is to it. Every other fan base has biased fans, but I truly believe that their brains don't work like the rest of us. I don't know any other way to put it than that.
Now, fans, that's funny. And fans, I get. I don't expect other fans or other podcasts from other teams. But people whose opinions I enjoy and respect, I don't get it.
You know what's a weird thing?
It doesn't matter. But
there's one weird phenomenon, and Tim, I'm sure you get this more because you're in England. There's this weird phenomenon that the Arsenal people in the media seem to try to counteract their Arsenal support by being more critical of Arsenal so they don't come across as biased. Whereas the other people in the media just support their team nakedly. The only obvious example that goes against that is Ian Wright, who is adorable, and we love him to pieces. Yeah, Tim?
Yeah, it does feel a bit like that. But yeah, I don't know. I listen to the same podcast, Paul, name check there, and yeah, it's fine. I don't really mind. The proof will be in the pudding. So
good point.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Who cares?
Normally I don't mind Tim, but I'm a bit
reaction.
incensed and irate, and I don't know why. It's pissing me off. They keep Elliot.
Okay.
How could they?
Look, I love that you have the energy for that this early in the season. I love it. Keep that energy up. But this is a marathon, not a sprint. I think we can just about leave it there with one last little thing. Tim, you talked about players that you didn't want to invest in emotionally because you're not sure they'll still be around. I do think Kieran Tierney will go, but Emil Smith-Rowe, we're all going to be kind of looking to see, is there a role for him this season? At 2-1, probably not necessarily the game for him, although maybe his directness on the counter would have been helpful, but still trying to figure out the situations where Mikel feels confident to bring that player on. And at 2-0, 70 minutes in, us flagging, I would have thought, maybe Havertz off and Smith-Rowe on, or Nketiah off. You can move Havertz 9, Smith-Rowe on. He didn't do it. I just wonder, you always say this. A manager tells you what he thinks of his player with his selection. Whatever we think of Nketiah, Mikel has shown he's willing to trust him. And I don't think he's shown that with Smith-Rowe yet. Do you think that we're going to see that turnaround anytime soon?
Yeah, I'm sticking a pin in that one because it's been a long time since Smith-Rowe had Premier League minutes that weren't garbage minutes, that weren't like, because we're 4-1 up or 4-1 down. And this, look, Fabio Vieira didn't get on either. There were only 3 substitutions made. I think the Timber injury made a difference there. That's another reason he should have come off at half time, because the half time substitution kind of doesn't count. You still get 3 more chances after that, and that would have been a sensible thing to do. So Arteta denied himself that option. I think that's part of the poor management of the second half from the dugout. Yeah, I've got a pin in that one, put it that way, because I kind of feel like, look, at 2-1, like, Gabriel was the very obvious person to bring on, like, clearly, and then he didn't have any after that. So, maybe there's something circumstantial there, but it's got a pin until Smith-Rowe gets quality Premier League minutes. I'll have a pin in that for sure.
Yeah. Well, let's see. Long season, as we've said, lots of opportunities. Mikel showed, even with this lineup in this first game, that he may be starting to evolve into a manager who is going to go horses for courses, who is going to try to pick a group that presents the maximum amount of problems to the opposition based on the challenge that they pose. Couldn't pick 2 more different opponents back to back. City, Forest. And we saw very different approaches to what we wanted to do in those games, and equally successful in their own ways. So maybe we'll see a lot more of that. Look, we are still learning about this group and how they're going to be used. The important thing is learning while we win. Manchester City, I know I've said it a million times, everybody felt they got off to a slow start last season. But then you look at the points they picked up plenty. And then when they got really good, that was enough to put them in front and win the title. If we can do something similar this season, I think we could have a similar type of season to what City did last season. And I'm not saying we might win the treble. I'm saying we will win the treble, is what I'm saying. Okay, we can definitely leave it there. Please join Clive and I for the rewatch. I think you'll really enjoy it. If you've never seen it before, we watch. The game is on the screen as we talk. You can watch it. You can see it. We stop it. We show what's happening. This is a fascinating game to look at that, I think. Always really good for breaking down biases you have coming out of the game. And then we'll have a lot more 6 days a week of stuff for you, whether that's here or there. We just love you for being here. Again, cannot emphasize how excited we are to have you along for this title-winning, treble-winning season with us. And we can't wait to share it with you all season long. Tim is on Twitter at Stillmanager. Thank you, Tim.
My pleasure as always.
Paul's on Twitter, Pops on Pants Plus.
Woohoo!
My name, sadly, is Elliot Smith. You can and should block me on Twitter at Yankee Gunner. In fact, you can block me on X, which just sounds like a thing that's going to have the FBI ringing my doorbell.
App.
Yes, it is the
You
Everything
can even
app.
block Elliot on it.
It has every feature, including blocking me on it. We love you. And we will absolutely talk to you after Arsenal 10, pal.